Hey everyone, this is Fady from Harvey Production Studio, and welcome to another video. Today's video, I'm going to be discussing the difference between MADI and DANTE. They're both audio over network, some form of network, and they're both are becoming more and more common in studios, live rigs, and live setup. And I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions of both, lots of pros and cons for both, and I want to discuss the difference between both, what's the advantage of each one, disadvantage of each one, as well as applications for them in your studio or in your live rig. So I happen to use actually both in my studio right now. I use DANTE and MADI, as well as I've used DANTE and MADI for so many rigs and setups for live sounds that I've installed at many different places. And I've had experience with both over the last several years. And in today's video, we're just going to go through both of them and all the specs and the details and what do you want to know about it. Okay, let's start with the obvious, which is DANTE uses Ethernet cable, and it's audio over Ethernet, and it uses just a normal Cat5, Cat6 cable. And what it does is you have digital audio converted into DANTE that passes through one Ethernet cable. The Ethernet cable goes to a DANTE switch. Could be basically any form of like an Ethernet switch, but you wouldn't want that to be on the internet. That way it doesn't continue to change the IP address. You want it to be a closed switch. Although I have worked before with internet, where the switch is on the internet and it didn't cause problems if it's set up properly. But the idea is you got 64 channels of audio passing through that Ethernet cable. Once it hit the switch, that 64 channels of audio basically goes on your network. Now, any device on your network that has DANTE compatibility or just works with DANTE and it's tapped into that network via Ethernet, it gets that 64 channels of audio. What's the advantages here? So practical example would be at a live rig, you have your stage box offers DANTE. So you have 64 channels in your stage box, all your mics and pre's and all that stuff. That goes into your network. Now, the board, front of house board, is grabbing those 64 channels. And then you have a different broadcast setup that is also grabbing the 64 channel. Then you have a video room that is grabbing the 64 channel. And then you have a separate in-ear monitor setup that uses DANTE that is also grabbing all the 64 channel. You take those 64 channel and you duplicate them in your network to many places. Obviously, it sounds so easy. It sounds like, wow, this is amazing. Because back in the day, before DANTE existed, the only way for us to do this, we had to use analog snake splitters. And I've worked in a place before where at the stage, we had each channel split 4 ways, and then analog split 4 ways. And you have to use very high quality splitters so you don't use decibels every time you split. And then the signal drops as well. And then we would split one for front of a house board, one for a redundant board, one for in-ears, and one for broadcast. And the idea is the alternatives was actually very complex, expensive, but then everybody's like, yeah, well, DANTE is now the way to go. Yes. But because it's audio over Ethernet, the biggest mistake and issue, and you guys probably, if you look online and search for DANTE, you'll find a lot of people have issues with it. Because it's an Ethernet or network protocol, it requires some IT expertise, and you need to understand the difference between static IP and dynamic IP, multicast versus unicast. There's a lot of network related issues that comes with it and troubleshooting that you need to be familiar with that to do it, because it's at the end of the day, it is audio, but then everything how that audio is processed and transmitted and splitted, it's happened over network, and you need an IT person to understand this. Most of us audio engineers, whether you're a studio engineer or live engineer, a lot of the engineers work with, they don't have a network degree. And then there's the problem comes in a DANTE problem or an issue, and it's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. Or we're obviously used to one-to-one. You plug in the XLR to the snake, it works, it doesn't. You do a cable tester, it doesn't work, then you swap it. But with DANTE is a little bit different. So that's one of the things about DANTE you would want to be careful of, and that's one of the issues that a lot of people have experienced, is that the network wasn't set up properly. And then there was IP conflict and stuff started to unpatch itself. Now, on the other hand, on MADI, you are transmitting via fiber optic cable, and it's a special MADI cable. It looks a little bit similar to the ADAT cable, but the connector, the tip of the connector is a little bit different. And it's still, they're cheap cables. I think they vary somewhere between $10 to $50, and you can run them far as well. Similar to Dante, but the difference is MADI is 1-to-1, which means I have a MADI device here, I have a MADI device here, and I run that cable from here to here. It sends me 64 channels of audio in and 64 out from this device to this device, and that's it. It does not tap into network. It does not go to a switcher. It does not go to IP addresses and all that stuff. It's not affected by anything. It's just from one place to the other place. And there's also no duplication of the signal. So if you want to send this to multiple places, that means, so let's say if you have a stage box and you want to send a stage box to 4 different places, it's either going to need to have a MADI splitter, which I'm not sure if they actually have that. I haven't researched that myself. Or the unit itself, the stage box has multiple MADI outputs. Like I worked with an SSL board that had 2 MADI outputs. Each carries 64 channels of audio, so I can split it into, or I can send that twice. Or you can add MADI cards to your board, and then every card would carry 64 channels of audio, and you keep sending them. But it's not like one signal that is splitted everywhere and duplicated into multiple places. Comes with advantages and disadvantages. Advantages, it's more stable, a lot more stable than Dante, because it's 1-to-1, and this is going to this, and there is no network involved in the process. There's no IP. You don't have to have a lot of network degree and as a sound tech or a sound engineer to be able to patch this. You just patch it from the board, MADI output 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then receive it the same way on the other side. The clocking with MADI is a bit more stable than Dante. Dante clocking has been very finicky, and Dante doesn't like when you tell it who's the master clock. But with MADI, I found that the clocking was a bit more stable. So in my current setup, I have, for example, between my Galaxy interface into my RME unit over here, it's a MADI connection, which is a 1 MADI cable, carries 64 channels of audio. And then on that RME, it converts all 64 MADI channels to ADAT, inputs and outputs. So I can have 8 sets of ADATs, each a channel on that unit. And then these 2 units are connected via word clock, BNC cable. And I had clocking has been stable, not any problem. Now I also have from my Galaxy goes to my M908, because my M908, the rack module, I have the Dante card in it. So I'm passing an Ethernet cable between these 2, and then I was able to tap into the Dante feature. This one supports only 32 Dante channels. The Galaxy supports 64, so I'm using only the first 32 channels off that. And then I'm clocking this via Dante instead of MADI. I still haven't messed with, I want to try to see if I can clock it BNC and force clock the BNC on the Dante and see how it's going to respond or not. And then because I'm using Dante on this one, I'm also plugging my computer, my Mac Studio, to the network, the same network that has the Dante. So I go through a little switcher. That way I can open software. It's called Dante Controller, which allows me to patch the Dante channel 1 to channel 1, channel 2, channel 2, that kind of stuff. So with MADI, there's no MADI controller. You're doing the patching from the MADI device itself. You're saying send to MADI channel 1, send to MADI channel 2, send to MADI channel 3, and then the receiving device, like my RME, I'm just receiving MADI channel 1, 2, 3. It just goes 1-to-1. On the Dante is a little bit different because you got more flexibility on the patching. I can also take channel 1 from Dante, send it to the M908, but I also send it somewhere else and somewhere else and somewhere else. If I have multiple Dante devices here in the studio. Another thing about Dante that is very intriguing, there's a thing called DVS, which is Dante Virtual Sound Card. I think it's like $20 or $30 for the license. And when you download this to your computer, you purchase the license, download it, it has like a virtual sound card that is Dante compatible and receives 64 channels of audio. So I can basically be in my studio in here, and then I can grab a laptop on the side and then put the DVS on it, plug that to the network via Ethernet cable. This is not Wi-Fi. It's got to be Ethernet cable and plugged into the network that has the Dante in it. And then I can tap into all 64 channels of Dante in the studio on my laptop immediately, and I can record it or do. I've actually used that a lot because a lot of times when we did live tracking sessions at a venue that we used their board and their equipment, and if they had Dante, I grabbed an Ethernet cable into my unit, and then I recorded 64 channels of Dante directly into my laptop. I did not need an interface. I did not need anything. Which is really cool features for Dante. You just want to make sure that the network is set up correctly. Now, in terms of audio quality, I think, so MADI, you're not converting anything inside the laptop. There's no virtual conversion. It's all the conversion that are happening on the MADI cards on your units. So for example, right now I have my Galaxy and I have my RME. They're both using MADI. There's a MADI card on this one, MADI card on this one, and that's how they're communicating. Any conversion is happening is dependent on the quality of the cards of the unit. And a lot of times those MADI stuff are not cheap and they're very high quality. Now with Dante, it's depending on what are you converting and how are you converting. If I'm using the Dante card on the Galaxy versus I'm using a DVS versus I'm using a little Dante converter, and I've worked with different ones. Some are better converters and some are significantly lesser converters. And specifically the DVS, what I just mentioned right now, I've had some issues with quality-wise. We ran a test one time on a PA system at a venue, and we ran MADI via, we fed the PA system MADI, and then we also fed the PA system Dante. And then we were switching back and forth between both, and we noticed a difference in quality. Stereo image was a little bit wider with the MADI, a little bit cleaner with the MADI. So I don't, I don't use Dante in recording in my studio. And then because I use the Grace Design converters, so it takes the Dante signal, converts it using their own converters, which are mastering grade converters. I was really skeptical about it. So I ended up grabbing a SPDIF cable from the Galaxy to the Grace, as well as the Dante cable. And I ran the same mix through both the SPDIF and the Dante. And then I went back and forth, A-Bing them to make sure that I'm not losing any quality on the Dante, and I wasn't. So I was confident about this one, that is no compromise of quality, but be careful with DVS or the little AVIO devices, the Dante AVIO devices. I've used those a lot, and there's a lot of articles out there about how the top end dips with those. Is not like, I would not, for example, grab a Dante signal from my studio to one of these AV devices and then feed my speakers and then trust what I'm mixing via this. That would be way too scary and way too unreliable for me, because at that point, the level and the clarity of the conversion would be significant, would be very important for me to notice and keep that quality. Finally, between Dante and MADI, because they're both digital audio over network, closed network versus Ethernet, you can run those far without having to worry about issues. Versus XLRs, when you pass the 20-foot level, you get a little worried and you have to use DIs and stuff like that. And then if you have, for example, a broadcast room that is 200 feet away or 300 feet away, with Dante, you can run those or MADI, without having to have the same issues that you would have with running physical snakes with XLRs and stuff like that. Anyways, this is a very simple, quick explanation between both. I'll probably do another video, go into more specs and details, and I'll show what the Dante controller looks like and all that stuff. But this is just a simple, quick difference between MADI and Dante. So if you're buying a device and it says that it has Dante or it has MADI, at least you understand now what's the difference and what's the advantages of both. And you can see if you can use any of this and it applies to your setup or not. I hope this video is helpful. If you have any questions, make sure you put in the comment. If you need any help with setting up your studio for routing, please make sure to send me an email. My email is in the description below, and I do Zoom online scheduled sessions with a lot of studios where I can help them with the routing and setup, and I hope I can help you with what you need. If this video is helpful, please share it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys at the next video.